Hello, everybody, and welcome to Double Take. I'm Rick,
I'm Lori.
and we are brought to you by Oneness Ministries and the Stream Grace Network.
Yes, that's oneness-ministries.org, where you can find out everything about us, everything we do, everything you ever wanted to know, and more, probably.
Probably more than you want to know.
Yeah, no, you want to know everything. You can sign up there for our newsletter, our email newsletter, that to find out everything that's going on. We'll keep you up to date. If you would like a free study guide to every one of these podcasts.
Did you say free?
I said free. Free. Low price of free. Just shoot me an email at lfry@oneness-ministries.org. Share us with your friends if you like us.
Yep.
Communicate with us. We'd like to know what you think, and if there's something you'd like to hear us talk about, we're open to those suggestions as well.
We would love to hear from you.
Yeah, and if you'd like to support us, you can do that at the website as well.
Yes.
Because you're the ones that keep this going.
Yep.
We
Keep it
appreciate
afloat. You're the ones that keep this ship floating.
Okay.
I've tried to use enthusiasm.
I keep the ship floating. Okay. Okay. So we are in the series of the Gift of Oneness, which is about oneness in marriage. And last week we started with our talk about communication.
Yes, we did.
Which is huge for most couples.
It is.
No matter how hard you want to understand, sometimes you just miss the boat. Ha!
So when
I'll use
there's
the boat analogy.
when there's communication
Never mind. You're not even. See, we're not communicating. So there was a commercial not too long ago,
Yep.
and it was for some burger place.
Yes.
And there's a husband and wife sitting there, and she goes, "I can't believe we got all this for $5." And he goes, "I can't believe we got all this for $5." And she goes, "You never listen to me." And he goes, "I know, right?" Sometimes
we quote
that happens here.
So what do you think when there's communication problems? What do you think is really going on?
Well, we're trying to get our needs met. We're trying to connect. There's lots of reasons, and that's what we're going to talk about. Because like we ended off last time, miscommunication and misunderstanding is going to happen. There's going to be conflict.
Yes.
And again, there's no magic way to avoid conflict, but there are things you can look for that might help you understand each other a little bit better.
Yes.
Because if you understand where your spouse is coming from, then it's a little easier to give grace. Well, this is why he does what he does. He's not trying to be mean. He's not a mean person. He's not a liar. He's not, he does care about me. And if I can remember those things and try to understand and hear underneath what he's saying, and vice versa, that can eliminate a lot of the communication issues. So it's about what's really going on.
Yeah. So do we want to read that first paragraph?
Yes. Why don't we read the first paragraph?
Okay. While communicating, it's important to look for what your spouse is really trying to get out of the other. It's important to look at what one spouse is trying to get out of the other. For example, during one conversation, a husband was trying to figure out whether or not a spouse valued his opinion or decisions. During the same conversation, the wife was wanting to know if he heard and cared for her. Can you see why communication would be so difficult or could be so difficult? Each individual was trying to get something from the other that differed significantly. And therefore their communication
Missed.
It missed.
It just missed out.
The following are some common agendas or affirmations we commonly see during communication.
Yeah, it's basically what's the underlying thing.
Yeah.
And there are some that are pretty common. And the first one I think is probably the most common.
Yes.
And it's control. Many issues in a relationship deal with control. Who's in charge or who makes the decisions about where we go or what we do, or even who's right.
Yeah.
Let's throw that one in there.
Yeah.
And so people who are control-oriented tend to get a sense of importance and security from being in control. And
And most people who want to be in control will deny wanting to be in control.
oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I can think of lots of examples,
Yes.
but I'm not going there. But if they are, the thing to understand is if they're not in control, they feel like they are less than or less important.
Right.
So it's not always I'm going to lord it over you. It's do I matter?
Yes.
So therefore, control issues might be a problem in a particular marriage. So what can the battle for control look like?
Let's
Rick?
say that in a particular relationship, the man is controlling. His wife feels marginalized and stifled. As she reacts to his control over the time, she comes to a place where she vows that she won't let him control her anymore. She becomes the controller, and he becomes controlled. They have changed roles in the relationship, and the very thing that she hated in his behavior, she has become. Meanwhile, the man cannot say anything or suggest anything without being perceived as an effort to control.
Yeah, now let's think about that. Now we're making it the man, and that's not always the case. There's a
Absolutely,
lot
yeah.
of women that are controlling,
yeah.
and men just kind of stay passive to just keep the peace.
Well, give us an example of control.
Well, I wouldn't know because I'm not controlling. Why don't you give us an example?
Well, control can look like if you do something for me, then I'll do something for you.
Yeah.
But
Well,
if
that's-
it's based on what you've done for me,
But that's not grace.
no.
That's called law.
Yep.
So, I mean, a control thing can be. I'm trying to think of a good example.
Yeah, me too. I'm running.
Well, okay. If you sometimes someone can use anger as control, and they don't even have to say anything. You can just see the anger come across their face. And it's a control because they're using it to shut you down.
Yes.
And first, and then that might not be how it happens at first, but at some point you can see the other person getting angry. And because you're either fearful or you're not willing to go
Engage,
there with that, it's just not worth it, you shut down.
Yeah.
And the spouse goes, this works. It's working for me because if I just do that, then she's going to stop talking.
Well, we talked about this last week, that sometimes in the heat of an argument, the woman will cry. And sometimes that's a way to control the argument, because if she breaks down crying, then I'm just gonna back off.
Right. Although most of us don't cry on demand like that.
No.
But it can be seen as control. See, this is why it's so complicated.
Yep.
But basically it's anything that is any behavior that causes the other spouse to back off.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they can choose to back off, anyway. Does that make sense?
yes. So it's an attempt to take control of the argument, to make you stop saying what you're saying or feeling what you're feeling.
Right.
And we all use anger to do that sometimes.
Or even a case of every time, Frick's telling a story, and every few seconds I'm going, well, that's not exactly how it happened.
That's right.
Or, well, you forgot this part. Or if I just keep interrupting him, that's control.
Yeah.
And now there's lots of reasons for that as well.
Yeah, because she wants it to be right.
Sometimes I want it to be right. Sometimes I'm trying to get attention, let's say. I'm trying to get the attention back on me. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons, but control is a huge issue. It's a power struggle.
Yes.
So many couples just have a power struggle. Or like we talked about the man's ego before in a couple of podcasts ago, if I think he's got too big of an ego, I'm going to cut it down to size. I'm going to teach him, and I'm going to embarrass him or, like I said, cut him off or
Contradict him.
yeah,
Or
make fun of him
Yeah.
in public
That's
with
a
other
bit-
people.
That's a huge one. Making fun of the person you
Love.
love. Teasing sometimes. Well, I'm just trying to be funny. But sometimes
Sometimes it's not funny.
it's not funny. It's a way to control the conversation.
Yeah, saying things like, "What? You're just too sensitive."
Yeah.
That anyway.
Yeah.
Trying to ridicule or marginalize your spouse is control.
Yes.
Okay.
What's the second one?
Second one is trust. Sometimes it's that's what we're trying to find out. A spouse may sometimes you may openly question the other's integrity. Well, can I trust you? Are you going to tell the truth? Are you going to do what you said? Are you going to follow through? And then sometimes one spouse might keep the other one at a distance for that reason.
Yes.
Because basically you're trying to protect yourself.
Yeah.
So is their word honest and dependable? Often the other's behavior is examined closely to determine if they truly mean what they say. You're under the microscope all the time. Well, you said you were going to do that. Are you going to do it? Or did you do it? Or, do you mean it? And if there's been a breach of trust in the marriage of any kind, then it may take a lot of time and effort for the trust to be restored.
You know what? When there's a trust issue, and I'll tell my own story. The way when I feel controlled, when and you don't do this, but I've been in
Very good.
situations, relationships where the other person used, I don't trust you, you don't finish what you start. And a lot of times that caused me to become passive. And that leads to passive aggressive. So I don't do things just because I want to gain control. Or I won't follow through on things because it gives me a sense of control.
Right. Well, see, that's back to the whole control thing. That's
Yeah.
another thing. The
Yeah.
passive aggressive
Yeah.
is also control.
But when you're pushed by lack of trust, then you don't feel like you have any kind of control.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and we've talked to couples before where, the only way one spouse is going to trust the other spouse is if they prove that they're trustworthy or that they didn't do something. And sometimes that's impossible.
Yeah.
And no matter what you do, you can't gain their trust. Well, you can't have a solid relationship without trust. And sometimes there's a reason that trust needs to be restored, but sometimes it's not that at all.
Yeah.
So anyway, but trust is a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Okay.
Number 3 is commitment. When commitment is an agenda, the individual can place their spouse in situations that force them to choose between friends, churches, activities, families, etc. For example, if you really love me, you won't go out with your friends anymore. If you really loved me, you would come home to my family, or you'd come to my family's home for the holidays if you loved me. And boy, when you tag that on,
Yeah. Well, guys like, Rick likes to golf. So I could, if I'm afraid he's not committed to me, for example,
Yeah.
I could say, well, if you really wanted to be with me, you wouldn't be going golfing today
yeah,
or every Saturday or whatever, which he doesn't do. But, show me that I'm important. I want to know that you're committed to me. And you may ask, there was a couple that said, well, if you love me and you care about what I think, then I want you to not go to this church anymore because I want you to go to church with me somewhere else because somebody in this church doesn't like me.
Yeah. Wow.
And it was kind of an unreasonable request.
And that's pretty insidious, don't you think?
Yes. But that's just an example. So
Yeah.
these again are underlying issues when there's a miscommunication.
Right.
So love is the next one.
Oh,
I-
when love is an agenda, the individual may do or say something to try to get your attention and affirmation. A wife may ask how they look or mention a perceived failing. What she is really asking is, do you really love me? Will you still love me if I fail? Are you really concerned with me and my life? Do I still matter?
Yeah. We may say something like, oh, I just can't believe I did that. What a mess I made. I'm so clumsy or I'm so whatever.
That's it.
And what we want to hear you say is, no, you're not.
Yep.
We want you to say that. That's why we say those things.
Yep.
Talk me out of it.
Yep.
Because if you believe something sweet about me, then maybe I can believe it too.
Yep. A husband,
Now but the husband thing is different.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
It is different. A husband might say, what do you think of what I've just done? And I built a camper shell on the back of my truck. What do you think of it?
Which he absolutely did.
Yeah.
And it was very cool.
I am affirmed and respected, but whether or not you love me is not the question. I know that you love me, but do you admire what I've accomplished? Which leads us into the next agenda.
Yeah, and And so what you said, and the next one is respect,
Yes.
because from what you explained, that for us it's about, do you love me, and for you,
Do you respect me?
and that
Am I successful? Because our biggest fear as men is that we're going to fail.
but how does that relate to love?
Well, it relates to love because when you engage in my activity, it means you're engaging in me. Because a lot of times I identify with what I'm doing. I get so get so focused on what I'm doing, and then I back off and I go, oh, is this really what I wanted? Let me ask Lori. And Lori will come out and she will affirm me. She will say, wow, I can't believe you did that. And that just is like, I don't know, energy.
But the respect and the love is sort of intertwined for men. Is that right?
That's exactly right.
So it's different. We're still looking for love and respect, but for men it's kind of tied together.
Yes. Those
And
two
so
are
it,
tied, yes.
So it is received differently.
Yep.
Is that fair?
Yep.
Okay. So respect. When respect is underneath the communication, the person might say, you don't seem to be listening to me or valuing what I'm saying. That sounds like a woman. What we really want to know is, do you respect my thoughts and feelings, and am I worthy of respect? That may sound more like a man.
Am I enough? Am I acceptable?
Yeah.
Am I what you dreamed of or thought of when you were thinking about getting a husband as a little girl? All of those things are really important to us because I have to be successful. Don't ask me why. Well, I know why. Because it is important for me to provide for her, to keep her happy. And so a lot of times we tie that as men to our performance.
And that's love as well.
Yeah.
So those are just some of the major underlying. As you listen to each other, if you can try to say what's underneath that.
Yes.
What is he really looking for, and vice versa. And I think it's maybe,
What does she want to hear from me?
right.
Yeah.
Right. And sometimes we don't tell you outright. And sometimes you don't either. Sometimes you don't either.
Nope.
So we've got.
And it's interesting that sometimes these things are, we're not conscious of wanting or needing. I'm not conscious of wanting or needing affirmation, but I am because I'm asking you for your opinion. And man, I hope it's positive.
Yeah, you better hope it's. Well, and I think sometimes, I'm speaking for women, but I would think it would be a little bit towards men too. We don't know why we're upset
Yes.
yet.
Yes.
We don't know why we feel off or angry
Insecure.
or insecure. Yeah, we don't even know why.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's an emotion that connects us to something else. So, which goes back to what we talked about a couple of weeks ago about, we have to talk it out so that we understand what's going on. Because sometimes, I used to have this friend, and she was probably the best friend I ever had. And she and I actually worked together for a while. And there were some mornings that we spent the first couple of hours just talking because she had something going on or I had something going on, and we needed to talk to each other. And by talking to each other, we figured out what was really happening, and we got to a place of resolve.
Yeah.
And women, that's kind of
so
what we
important.
do.
It's so
But
important.
we want, even though men are not like that, we kind of need you to make an effort to do that. And so you can kind of help us figure out what's underneath
Especially
that when sometimes we don't know yet.
especially in conflict.
Yeah.
Women need resolve. Oops, I just pushed a button. Women need resolve, and men just need to go, I'm done. I can't think about this anymore.
And they get to just move on to something else while
And-
we're still.
Yeah, so it's
I
really
need
important
help.
to understand she needs help getting through this,
Yeah.
and you can't run away from it.
Well, you can,
Guy.
but I wouldn't recommend it
I wouldn't recommend
because
it.
it won't last long.
Okay. Go ahead.
Well, so we've got some suggestions to work your way through the conflicts that arise in your marriage. The first one is, and it's really hard because for a lot of this we have to get out of the emotion and look at what's
Yep.
the issue. And if you need to take a breath and come back to it, do that. But one of the first things you need to do is just define the issue itself. What is it that we disagree on, and how do we disagree? What is the actual thing? What's the real issue? Keep to the topic without making it personal,
Right.
and just talk about that particular thing. Now, we're talking about this in the context of marriage, but actually that works for any kind of relationship.
It does.
And I think, in general, women go to, this thing happened, but it also is related to that thing you did 3 years ago that I'm still not real happy with you about.
Right.
But we have to keep to the one thing. That's not fair.
Yeah.
But so what's the issue? Because sometimes, and I'll throw this out. We're in the middle of a political season. I think sometimes in politics, instead of sticking to the actual issue that we disagree on and being honest that we just disagree on the issue, we resort to personal attacks.
Yeah.
Because that's what happens if you get off the issue, then you become personal and hateful.
Mm-hmm.
And that happens in marriage.
And there can be no resolve
Yeah.
when it becomes personal and hateful.
Right. And that causes relationships to die
Which
of all kinds.
Which takes us to the next topic. How can we respectfully communicate with each other in such a way that would promote understanding? How do we promote oneness and not separation?
Yeah.
First of all, in my opinion, you have to get out of the emotions. You can't be controlled by the fear, the anger, all of the emotions that well up inside of us, and they may be different for each person, but you cannot allow them to control the way you communicate.
Mm-hmm. And when you get overly emotional and get away from what the actual issue is, then you can't talk anymore.
Yeah.
You can't resolve anything. And, we've had friendships end and other, marriages end. That's what happens when, and then you start going places that aren't even true. And back to the politics again. There are things that are said that aren't true. They're close, but they're not. They're blown out of proportion. And you can't, if you really want to communicate and connect with the person, you just can't. You can't allow the emotions to be in the driver's seat.
No, you can't. You cannot do it.
So how can I state my perspective so that what I share will not be seen as an attack on you or be seen negatively by you?
I think that comes down to a choice. When in conflict, sometimes I choose not to listen. Sometimes I choose not to hear. I may be listening, but I'm not hearing you. And so I refuse to accept your perspective because I've chosen that for whatever reason, you are now disrespecting me and I have to defend.
Right. Well, and the other thing about choosing your words carefully.
Yeah.
I don't want to say something like, I hate to keep going back to this silly little thing, but you always leave your fingerprints on the microwave. I mean, that's not something we would have a major argument about. But just for
Well, okay, we would not have a major argument over that.
No.
But if I continue to do that without respect of what she needs, she stuffs it. She may stuff it, and at some point, I could begin to touch it, and all of that stuffing could come out at one time in one big explosion.
Yeah, you better hope that one. But I guess more than what I'm saying is just using that as an example. Instead of saying you're always leaving fingerprints on the microwave, I could say something more like, I know you're not aware of this because you're in the middle of doing something else, but if you would stop for just a minute and wipe down the microwave when you're done, I would really appreciate that.
And yes.
Yeah,
And
because
that's totally fair.
And that's a way that it's not an attack. Now, sometimes, if you're dealing with somebody that just gets angry easy, they're always going to see it as an attack.
Yeah.
Or somebody that feels very insecure, man or woman, they're always going to see it as an attack. But we do get to stop and choose not to see it that way. if we can put it as carefully and as kindly as we can,
Exactly.
and not saying you do this, so stop it, but we could say, I know you, I know you probably don't know this, but let me make you aware of this. Like, okay, we're going to use an example. Many years ago, he and I were working on something, and I needed to ask him. It was about work. I needed to ask him a question, and he was in the middle of something. And so I said, when you're done messing with that, will you come talk to me because I need to talk to you about something? And the next thing I knew, a few minutes later, he came in my office and he said something like, when you said that, I went back to, if I'm messing with something, it's not important. So I took that as, when you're finished doing something that's really not all that important, you please come talk to me because I have something important to talk to you about. And I had no idea that that's what he thought. Yeah. And it was from his history, whatever. But because he told me that in the way he told me, I could understand it.
I made a choice. Mm-hmm. I could get angry because I was disrespected, what I was doing was disrespected, or I could say, here's what I heard when you said what you said to me. It comes down to that choice.
Right. And plus, I think that you knew, even though you got emotional about it for a minute, I think you knew that I wasn't demeaning what you were doing.
Yeah, I didn't assign. I decided, not only did I decide not to get angry, I decided not to assign motives.
Right.
So all those choices come into play when somebody says something to you and you revert to what it used to mean.
Right. And in my case, that was just a phrase.
Yeah.
That wasn't what I meant. But we didn't have an argument. It was like, oh, well, now I understand that. Yeah. So now I only say that to make him laugh.
To
now
annoy
it's a
me.
joke.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's what that is. You going to read the next
Number
one?
3?
4.
Number 4. Mm-hmm. What do you think my motives are in looking at an issue the way that I do? Mm. What is your motive in perceiving the issue the way that you do?
Mm-hmm. Now, that's not, it's not a good idea, like Rick said, to assign motives to each other.
Right.
So it's not assigning a motive. Well, you said that because you think this. No, it's like, okay, I know this person. What could be going on? What could the motive be? Mm-hmm. And giving them the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
Rather than looking to be offended.
Is she struggling with something? Mm. Is she upset about something? Mm. Is she
not aware that she's in a really...
Is she in a bad mood or tired or
irritable.
Whatever? I have to take the time to figure out what is going on in her that causes her to say something the way she said it.
Yeah.
And the same is true for me.
Yeah. And now sometimes in the heat of the moment, we may say something ugly on purpose. Uh-huh. And we may mean it in the moment, or in the moment we may not mean it. We just said it because we're mad.
Or throw a cookie sheet.
Oh, that's a story, and it wasn't me that threw the cookie sheet. It was loud, too.
It was loud.
Anyway, but it didn't last much longer after that. Okay, so those are things to keep in mind. So there are better ways to communicate.
Many couples need some format to help them to begin to communicate more effectively with each other in the midst of conflict. The following is a method to use to communicate to your spouse or for anyone else for that matter. Mm-hmm.
Now, this is sort of a formula, follow this outline, but bear with us. Because communication during conflict requires that the couple seeks to understand each other, not just get their thing out. While one individual talks, the other listens to try to understand the other one. Mm-hmm. And this may seem very simplistic, but you would be amazed at how many couples cannot or will not seek to understand the other one. Mm-hmm. So what has been created, we got this from someone else, is a basic method of communication that is orderly and allows a couple to speak and be heard, kind of like a Robert's Rule of Order for a couple. It's a communication technique. Mm-hmm. So in this particular method, one person shares and the other listens until the one sharing senses that the other understands and not necessarily agrees with what they're saying. And then the sharer and listener then change roles. And these are the rules to follow to ensure an orderly way of communicating.
Okay. The rules for the one who is talking.
Let's say you're going first.
I'm going to go first. First, talk about your own feelings and perspective on the disagreement or misunderstanding. Try not to put words in the other's mouth, and don't assume you know what the other meant by the words or actions they used.
And while you're doing that, you got to keep it short. As you talk, keep it short, because your spouse will need to summarize what you say to see if they understand you before you go on to the next point.
And the third one is stop. After explaining your feelings and perception, give your spouse time to paraphrase what you've said.
Okay.
Don't keep repeating it and
Yeah.
saying what you've done.
Yeah, that has to, like we said, keep it short.
Yeah.
So now if you're the one listening, the first rule obviously is to listen, but you listen to what your spouse is saying as well as their demeanor while they're explaining. You have to put your own thoughts and feelings about yourself away for the moment and concentrate on understanding whether you agree or not. You have to just try to understand what the other one is saying. And you can take notes if you want to. But
It's important that you concentrate on that you
Yeah.
focus on that.
just on what they're saying
Yes.
and their face, all of that.
The second part of this is to summarize. Summarize what you hear the other saying. Be careful not to interject your own perspectives or feelings. Your goal is to understand the other individual.
Okay. And then you affirm what the other person is saying, which is hard when you don't agree and you want to defend.
Right.
But you affirm what they're saying. You can say something like, I can see why you feel that way, or I understand why you did that. Again, that doesn't mean you agree.
Yeah, try to remove the emotion
Yeah.
that's actually coming up while you're sitting there listening to this.
Yeah. It's hard to sit and listen.
Yeah. Remember, first, allow the person sharing to finish.
Don't interrupt.
Second, allow the summarizer to finish summarizing. The summarizer must keep it short as well. It's important to have the summarizer do a final summary once the sharer has finished.
And you can each ask questions to clarify.
Sure.
So that's, this sounds like, duh, I can figure that out, but you'd be surprised.
You'd
So
be surprised at how hard this is.
it is.
Yes.
We've put couples through it. It's very entertaining sometimes.
Yeah.
So the practice, in practice, what this looks like, we have a couple sit facing each other. Their knees are touching. They're looking into each other's eyes, and their hands are out, extended out.
Yeah.
And the person whose hands are on top has the floor first, and the other partner cannot interrupt. The one with the floor completes this sentence that we're going to tell you in a minute, beginning with a negative incident, the thing that's the problem, the thing that you're fighting about. When that person is finished, let's just do this. Rick and Lori are sitting facing each other, knees touching, eye contact, hands extended. The person whose hands are on the top has the floor. So
Sure, her hands will be
so
on
my
the top.
hands are on top. So while I'm talking, Rick can't interrupt. I get to complete my sentence, beginning with the negative thing that happened. When I'm finished, then Rick repeats what he heard, also without interruption. I don't get to interrupt him, okay?
Okay.
Then I either acknowledge that, yes, that's what I said, or I clarify, no, that's not exactly, let me tell you again. And then the technique is repeated using a positive incident, okay? And then the other person has the floor. So, and Rick kind of said this a few minutes ago, the prompts are, so the thing in the office.
Yeah. When you said when you're finished messing around with what you're doing,
Like you did
like
5 minutes ago.
like you did about 5 minutes ago. Okay.
I felt.
I felt marginalized and I felt unimportant
Yeah.
and disrespected.
Okay. Right. And here's another example. When you told me, this sounds like a woman thing, when you told me I was overreacting, which is always a good thing to say.
No.
Like when you told me I was overreacting, like you did during our conversation at dinner last night, I felt discounted, criticized, dismissed, and angry. and then the other person repeats that.
Yes.
We have watched people not be able to do this, honestly.
Yeah, because they want to fight.
Well, or they're not listening.
They're not. Yeah.
So then after the other person repeats it, if I go, okay, when I
Okay.
came into your office and I said, when you're done messing with that, come talk to me, you felt marginalized. Well, we did it a minute ago.
Yeah.
So blah, 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 however you felt.
Great example, dear.
Well, I would be listening harder if it was
Yeah.
that was a long time ago. So then after you get a positive or a response that you feel like, okay, he heard me, he understands, he repeated it back to me, then you do a positive one.
Yep. Like when you touched my hand, when you touched my hand when you walked by, like you did this morning, I felt important, loved, and secure.
So the listening partner only repeats back what they've heard. No adding or subtracting from, no rewording, no judging or defending. And like I said, it sounds really simple, but you'd be surprised how many couples struggle with this. One thing I want to say about the positive thing, because it doesn't sound very, why would you do that? We have watched, again, couples, they start with the negative, and then when they follow up with the positive, you can see the mood change. Because it says because what it says is, I've got this problem right now with you, but here's the other thing that I love about you. And it just changes the whole mood.
Or I still love you in spite of.
Yeah. So and the other thing you want to say is, you notice that it says, when you did this, I felt. So you want to stay away from phrases like, you made me feel, or you do this all the time, or you never do this. Don't do that.
Stay away from those words.
Yeah, and just stick with the one event.
Yeah.
Okay?
Be encouraged. Look for these things to change over time.
As you learn to communicate better.
You're no longer in a gender battle.
Yeah.
You're no longer in a power struggle. You seek to understand your spouse and are able to make different choices. You don't believe you are more spiritual than your spouse.
That happens a lot.
And you can see your spouse as a gift from God.
Yeah. And regardless of how much conflict or good things you experience in your marriage, God wants you to remember that your hope and trust is in Him and not in your spouse's ability to perform or the lack of their ability to perform.
Remember, you want to promote oneness, not separation.
Yeah. So there's a lot here. And if you'd like a copy of this, like I said, send us an email at lfry@oneness-ministries.org, and we'll send it to you for free. There is, we've counseled a lot of couples over the years, and the ones that make it are the ones that are both willing to do something different.
Right.
Think something different, try something different, and be more open to learning who they are in Christ, because that's where it all starts.
And it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work
Worth it.
to be in a relationship with another person who doesn't think like you.
Yeah. But it can get better.
It can get better.
Yep.
It has.
So we'll see you next week with something brand new.
Thank you, guys. Reach out and get this guide.
Yep. Bye, y'all.